Edwards Air Force Base was a busy place, planes zooming and people rushing. But in a quiet corner, near the big hangars, was a small office. This is where you'd usually find Millie. Millie wasn't a pilot or a general or anything fancy like that. She helped keep the base running smoothly. She answered phones, sorted mail, and made sure everyone had what they needed. She wore simple clothes, usually a blue shirt and jeans, and her hair was always pulled back in a ponytail. To most people, Millie just seemed like an ordinary woman doing an ordinary job. But Millie was special. She knew every inch of the base. She knew all the rules and all the people. She had a kind smile for everyone, and she always tried to help, no matter what. Little did everyone know, this simple woman had a secret, a hidden talent that would soon surprise them all. This secret, however, was well guarded, as she'd been ridiculed in the past for being a woman interested in flying. She kept her passions close to the vest, waiting for the right moment to show the world what she could do. One sunny morning, things at Edwards Air Force Base got a whole lot louder. A group of fancy jets screamed across the sky, landing with a confident roar. These weren't just any pilots. They were the Top Gun pilots, the best of the best. They were here for a special training exercise, working with the Air Force to try out new flying techniques. They arrived in a flurry of leather jackets, sunglasses, and booming laughter. They strutted around like they owned the place, impressed with their own skills. Everyone on the base was excited, but also a little nervous. These pilots had a reputation for being cocky and arrogant. Millie watched them from her little office, a small frown on her face. She knew these hotshots would probably cause some trouble. She just hoped they wouldn't cause too much. The air crackled with anticipation and a bit of dread as the Top Gun pilots began to settle in, ready to show off their amazing abilities. It didn't take long for the Top Gun pilots to start making their presence known. They swaggered into the main office, looking for coffee and directions. Spotting Millie at her desk, they exchanged smirks. "Hey, sweetie," one of them drawled. "Fetch us some coffee, would ya? And maybe a map? We're lost." Another pilot chuckled, adding, "Yeah, and maybe explain what all these buttons do? Seems complicated for a girl." Millie sighed inwardly. She'd expected this. She calmly pointed to the coffee machine and a wall map. "Coffee's over there. Map's on the wall. Everything you need is clearly labeled." The pilots laughed again, not taking her seriously. They made jokes about her clothes, her job, and her boring life. They assumed she was just a simple, unimportant woman, not worth their time or respect. They had no idea that they were making a huge mistake by underestimating her. Millie just smiled faintly, knowing that she would have the last laugh. Their arrogance was about to meet its match. What the Top Gun pilots didn't know was that Millie wasn't just pushing papers and answering phones. Behind that quiet exterior was a brilliant mind. She had a degree in engineering from a top university. She'd always loved airplanes, spending hours building models and reading about flight. She even secretly took flying lessons on weekends at a small airfield outside of town. She was a natural, but Millie faced a lot of discouragement. People told her that women didn't belong in aviation, that she should focus on more suitable careers. Hurt by these comments, she decided to keep her passion a secret. She took the job at Edwards Air Force Base, hoping to be close to planes without drawing too much attention to herself. It allowed her to learn everything about how a base operated and gave her access to the most recent blueprints and flight information. Now, as she watched the cocky pilots strut around, she knew her time to shine was coming. She just needed the right opportunity. The next day, a special aircraft arrived at Edwards. It was the B-2 Spirit, a giant bat-winged bomber, unlike anything else in the sky. It was sleek, stealthy, and incredibly powerful. The B-2 was a marvel of engineering, packed with cutting-edge technology. It was also notoriously difficult to fly. Only a handful of pilots in the world were qualified to handle it. The B-2 was at Edwards for some advanced testing. Everyone on the base was buzzing with excitement. Even the Top Gun pilots were impressed. They gathered around, gazing up at the massive aircraft with a mixture of awe and envy. They knew that flying the B-2 was the ultimate test of a pilot's skill. It was a challenge they couldn't resist. The B-2 gleamed under the sun, a symbol of power and technological prowess. Millie watched from her office window, a thoughtful expression on her face. She knew this plane could be her chance. The Top Gun pilots, never ones to back down from a challenge, immediately started lobbying to be allowed to fly the B-2. They argued that their superior skills and experience made them the perfect candidates. They boasted about their flight records, their awards, and their ability to handle any aircraft. The base commander, a stern but fair man, listened patiently. He knew the B-2 was a delicate machine, and he couldn't just let anyone take it for a spin. He explained that only pilots with specific training and certifications were authorized to fly the B-2. The Top Gun pilots were disappointed, but not defeated. They saw this as another opportunity to prove themselves. They spent hours studying the B-2's manuals, quizzing the qualified pilots, and trying to learn everything they could about the aircraft. They were determined to conquer this challenge and add the B-2 to their list of accomplishments. Their competitive spirit burned bright, fueled by their desire to be the best. Little did they know, a simple woman was about to show them what best really meant. The day of the B-2's practice run arrived. A qualified pilot, a seasoned veteran named Captain Reynolds, climbed into the cockpit. The engines roared to life, and the massive bomber slowly taxied onto the runway. Everyone watched with bated breath as the B-2 took off, gracefully soaring into the sky. The flight went smoothly for a while, but as Captain Reynolds prepared for landing, something went terribly wrong. A warning light flashed on the control panel. The landing gear system had malfunctioned. The wheels wouldn't deploy. Captain Reynolds tried everything he could, but nothing worked. The situation was critical. Landing without the landing gear would be disastrous, potentially destroying the B-2 and endangering the pilot's life. Panic began to spread through the control tower. The Top Gun pilots, who had been so eager to fly the B-2, now looked on with growing concern. The reality of the B-2's complexity and danger was sinking in. The air crackled with tension and worry. Millie, watching from her office, felt a surge of adrenaline. She knew she had to do something. In the control tower, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The base commander was on the phone with the engineers, desperately trying to find a solution. The qualified B-2 pilots were frantically reviewing manuals, searching for an override or a workaround. But nothing seemed to work. Time was running out. Captain Reynolds was circling the base, burning fuel, and the situation was becoming increasingly desperate. The Top Gun pilots, humbled by the crisis, offered suggestions, but their ideas were quickly dismissed. They lacked the specific knowledge of the B-2 systems. The pressure mounted. The possibility of a crash landing loomed large. The faces of the ground crew were etched with fear. This was a nightmare scenario, a test of skill, courage, and ingenuity. Everyone felt helpless, paralyzed by the complexity of the problem. It seemed like all hope was lost. But then, a calm voice cut through the chaos. It was Millie. "I think I know a way," she said quietly, stepping forward. All eyes turned to her, a mixture of surprise and disbelief on their faces. Millie's words hung in the air, a beacon of hope in the midst of despair. She explained that she had studied the B-2 schematics extensively and had identified a possible electrical override that could manually release the landing gear. She outlined the steps clearly and concisely, her voice calm and confident. She spoke with such authority and knowledge that even the most skeptical began to listen. The base commander, desperate for any solution, hesitated. Could he really trust this simple woman with the fate of the B-2 and its pilot? The Top Gun pilots exchanged glances. They still doubted her abilities, but they couldn't deny the urgency of the situation. Time was running out. Finally, the commander made a decision. "All right, Millie," he said. "Let's hear your plan. Walk me through it step by step." Millie took a deep breath and began to explain, her voice steady and determined. This was her moment. She was ready to prove that she was more than just an ordinary woman. She was ready to save the day. As Millie explained her plan, the Top Gun pilots listened with growing skepticism. "An electrical override? That's impossible," one of them scoffed. If it were that simple, the engineers would have found it already. Another pilot added, "She's just guessing. She doesn't know what she's talking about." They couldn't shake their initial impression of Millie as a simple, unqualified woman. They found it hard to believe that she could possess the knowledge and skills to solve such a complex problem. Despite their doubts, the base commander pressed on, following Millie's instructions. He relayed the steps to Captain Reynolds in the B-2, who cautiously began to implement them. The tension in the control tower was palpable. Everyone held their breath, waiting to see if Millie's plan would work. The Top Gun pilots, still unconvinced, stood back, arms crossed, ready to criticize if things went wrong. They were prepared to say, "I told you so," but deep down, a tiny part of them hoped that Millie would succeed. They just didn't want to admit it. Their pride was on the line, and they weren't ready to concede that a simple woman could outsmart them. Captain Reynolds, his voice strained, confirmed that he had followed all of Millie's instructions. Still, the landing gear remained stubbornly retracted. Fuel was running low. The base commander, his face etched with worry, looked at Millie. "Is there anything else?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Millie hesitated for a moment, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. Then, she took a deep breath and said, "There's one more thing, but it's risky, very risky." She explained that there was a secondary override, a manual release located in the B-2's undercarriage. It would require someone to climb into the wheel well while the plane was still in the air and activate the release. It was a dangerous maneuver, but it was the only remaining option. The base commander knew the risks were immense, but with no other choice, he reluctantly agreed. "All right, Millie," he said. "You're our only hope, but who can do it?" Millie paused, then said, "I can." The control tower fell silent. Everyone stared at her in disbelief. Was she really volunteering to risk her life? The base commander, his voice filled with a mix of apprehension and admiration, agreed to Millie's daring plan. There was no time to argue, no time to find another solution. Millie quickly changed into a flight suit, her movements swift and purposeful. The Top Gun pilots watched in stunned silence, their earlier arrogance replaced with a newfound respect. They realized that Millie wasn't just a simple woman. She was a brave and determined individual willing to risk her life for others. A harness was quickly attached to Millie, and she was carefully hoisted into the B-2's undercarriage. Captain Reynolds, his voice filled with concern, guided her through the process. Millie, despite the danger, remained calm and focused. She located the manual release and, with a surge of adrenaline, pulled it with all her might. A loud click echoed through the aircraft, and the landing gear slowly began to deploy. A collective sigh of relief swept through the control tower. Millie had done it, but the danger wasn't over yet. Now, Captain Reynolds had to land the B-2, and he was running out of fuel. The pressure was on. As Captain Reynolds began his descent, Millie noticed something was still not quite right. The wind shear was stronger than predicted, and the approach angle was off. She quickly calculated the adjustments needed and, grabbing the radio, spoke to Captain Reynolds. "Captain, the wind shear is stronger than expected. You need to increase your airspeed by 5 knots and adjust your approach angle by 2 degrees. Captain Reynolds, trusting Millie's judgment, immediately followed her instructions. The Top Gun pilots, listening in, were amazed. Her calculations were precise, her instructions clear and concise. It was like she was in the cockpit herself. But as the B-2 approached the runway, Captain Reynolds radioed in, "I don't think I can make it. The fuel is too low. I'm going to have to eject." Without hesitation, Millie replied, "Captain, let me talk you through a landing. I know you can do it. I know this plane. Just listen to my instructions." She then calmly and confidently guided Captain Reynolds through every step of the landing, using her engineering knowledge and flying experience to compensate for the challenging conditions. With Millie's calm and steady guidance, Captain Reynolds fought against the wind shear and the dwindling fuel supply. He followed her instructions precisely, trusting her expertise. The B-2 descended slowly, its massive wings cutting through the air. The tension in the control tower was unbearable. Everyone held their breath, praying for a safe landing. Finally, with a gentle bump, the B-2 touched down on the runway. A collective cheer erupted in the control tower. Millie had done it. She had saved the B-2 and Captain Reynolds' life. The Top Gun pilots, their faces etched with disbelief and awe, watched as the B-2 taxied to a stop. They had witnessed a miracle. A simple woman, whom they had dismissed and mocked, had displayed extraordinary courage, knowledge, and skill, averting a major disaster. They knew they would never underestimate anyone again. The air was filled with jubilation and relief. Millie had proven that true talent and heroism can come from the most unexpected places. She was the hero of the day. The Top Gun pilots, once so full of arrogance and self-confidence, were now speechless. They had come to Edwards Air Force Base to show off their skills, to prove that they were the best of the best. But they had been completely outshone by a woman they had dismissed as insignificant. They stood in stunned silence, watching Millie as she emerged from the control tower, surrounded by cheering airmen. Their faces were a mixture of embarrassment, admiration, and regret. They finally understood the true meaning of humility. They had judged Millie based on her appearance and her job, failing to recognize her hidden talents and her unwavering courage. They had been so focused on their own achievements that they had completely missed the potential for greatness in someone they considered ordinary. The experience was a humbling lesson, one that they would never forget. The cocky swagger that had defined them was gone, replaced by a newfound respect for the power of knowledge, skill, and determination, regardless of where it came from. They knew they had a lot to learn from Millie. From that day forward, Millie was treated with respect and admiration by everyone at Edwards Air Force Base. The Top Gun pilots, in particular, underwent a significant transformation. They sought her out, eager to learn from her expertise. They asked her about engineering principles, flight dynamics, and the intricacies of the B-2 systems. They listened intently to her explanations, humbled by her knowledge and her willingness to share it. The base commander, recognizing Millie's extraordinary talents, promoted her to a position where she could use her skills to improve the base's operations. She became a valuable asset, contributing to the development of new training programs and the implementation of innovative technologies. Millie's quiet confidence and her unwavering commitment to excellence inspired everyone around her. She became a role model for young women and men alike, demonstrating that anyone, regardless of their background or appearance, can achieve greatness with hard work, dedication, and a belief in themselves. Her kindness and her willingness to help others made her a beloved figure on the base. Millie had truly changed Edwards Air Force Base for the better. Millie didn't just stop at improving the existing systems. She saw opportunities to make the base even better. She proposed a new flight simulator that would mimic the B-2's flight characteristics, allowing pilots to practice emergency procedures in a safe environment. She suggested changes to the maintenance protocols, making them more efficient and less time-consuming. She also noticed that the base's library lacked resources on women in aviation. She worked tirelessly to expand the collection, adding books and articles that celebrated the achievements of female pilots and engineers. She wanted to inspire other young women to pursue their dreams, regardless of the obstacles they might face. Millie's ideas were innovative and practical, and the base commander eagerly implemented them. The new flight simulator proved invaluable in training pilots for emergencies. The improved maintenance protocols saved time and money, and the expanded library provided a valuable resource for aspiring aviators. Millie's contributions had a profound impact on the entire base, making it a safer, more efficient, and more inclusive environment. She was a true visionary. The Top Gun pilots, once arrogant and dismissive, now sought Millie's guidance on everything. They realized that true expertise wasn't just about flying skills. It was about knowledge, understanding, and a willingness to learn from others. They sat in on her training sessions, peppering her with questions. They even started volunteering at the base library, helping her organize the new collection of books on women in aviation. They were humbled by Millie's patience and her unwavering dedication to helping others. They learned that leadership wasn't about boasting and showing off. It was about inspiring and empowering those around you. They started mentoring younger pilots, sharing their knowledge and encouraging them to pursue their dreams. They also became advocates for diversity and inclusion, speaking out against prejudice and discrimination. The Top Gun pilots had undergone a complete transformation, thanks to Millie's influence. They were no longer just skilled aviators. They were leaders, mentors, and champions of equality. They had become better pilots and better people. The base noticed the change, and morale improved. Everyone was working better as a team. One day, a new class of Top Gun pilots arrived at Edwards Air Force Base. They had heard the stories about Millie, the simple woman who had saved the B-2 and transformed the base. They were eager to meet her and learn from her. The first thing they noticed was that the atmosphere at Edwards was different. It was more inclusive, more respectful, and more collaborative. The new pilots were welcomed with open arms by the veteran pilots, who shared their knowledge and their experiences. They were also impressed by the state-of-the-art training facilities, the efficient maintenance protocols, and the diverse collection of resources at the base library. They quickly realized that Edwards Air Force Base was a special place, a place where everyone was valued, and everyone had the opportunity to succeed. They were inspired by Millie's story and her unwavering commitment to excellence. They knew that they had a lot to live up to, but they were determined to carry on her legacy. The new pilots had entered a very different Edwards Air Force Base. It was now defined by excellence and teamwork. Millie's influence would continue to change the base for years to come. Millie's impact extended beyond just the pilots and the training programs. She organized community outreach events, inviting local schools to tour the base and learn about aviation. She started a mentorship program for underprivileged youth, providing them with guidance and support to pursue careers in STEM fields. She even established a scholarship fund to help deserving students attend college. Millie believed that Edwards Air Force Base had a responsibility to give back to the community, and she worked tirelessly to make a positive impact. Her efforts were met with overwhelming support from the base personnel, who volunteered their time and resources to help her achieve her goals. The community outreach events were a huge success, inspiring countless young people to consider careers in aviation and STEM. The mentorship program provided invaluable support to underprivileged youth, helping them overcome obstacles and achieve their full potential. And the scholarship fund enabled deserving students to attend college and pursue their dreams. Millie's commitment to service had transformed Edwards Air Force Base into a beacon of hope and opportunity for the entire community. She showed everyone that even the simple woman can change the world. Years later, Millie retired from Edwards Air Force Base, but her legacy lived on. The base continued to be a model of excellence, innovation, and inclusivity. The training programs were top-notch, the community outreach initiatives were thriving, and the spirit of collaboration and respect permeated every aspect of the base's operations. The Top Gun pilots, who had once mocked her, had become her lifelong friends. They often visited her, seeking her advice and sharing stories of their adventures. They never forgot the lessons she had taught them about humility, courage, and the importance of valuing everyone's contributions. And every year, on the anniversary of the B-2 landing, they would gather at the base to celebrate Millie's heroism and her lasting impact. They knew that she was the heart and soul of Edwards Air Force Base, the simple woman who had defied expectations and changed their lives forever. And they were eternally grateful for her presence in their lives. Edwards Air Force Base has never been the same and would always remember the day she landed the B-2. And sometimes, late at night, when the moon was full and the stars were bright, you could almost hear the faint roar of the B-2 Spirit, circling the base one last time. Some say it was just the wind, but others knew better. They knew it was Millie, the simple woman who had defied expectations and changed Edwards Air Force Base forever, watching over her beloved base, ensuring that her legacy of courage, kindness, and innovation would never be forgotten. Her story became a legend, passed down from one generation of pilots to the next. It was a reminder that true greatness can come from the most unexpected places, and that everyone deserves to be treated with respect and dignity. It was a testament to the power of knowledge, skill, and determination, and a celebration of the human spirit's ability to overcome any obstacle. Millie, the unsung hero of Edwards Air Force Base, would always be remembered as the simple woman who had landed the B-2 Spirit and changed the world.